23rd, 2000, and of course 25. We are now in the summer season. It was very interesting that there were parts of Alberta that on the first day of summer actually were experiencing snow. That's right, snow. In some parts of Alberta, they had 4 to 6 inches of snow. Now, that is unusual, but it is also typical of Alberta. And I want to remind you that each and every day that we live is, of course, the day which the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad. We all have days that are good days. And when we have good days, they always produce happiness and joy in our lives. But we also have bad days. And when those bad days happen, they give us experience and lessons. And then also, as well, those good days create in our lives memories. And so every day you should embrace whether they are good, bad, hard, or, happy. These are the days, of course, which are very, very interesting. Now, I've been watching some videos in recent days talking about the fact that right now we have a very dangerous situation happening in the world. In fact, some people say we are heading towards World War III. Now that's kind of scary when you think about it, because as I can tell you honestly, I haven't seen anything like this in my lifetime. It just reminds me of how important each and every day that we live brings us, the reality. Now, I've been watching the news since I was pretty young. Back in when I was young, of course, in the community in which we live, we only had two television stations. And for a while, we only had one television station. And it was out of Lethbridge, Alberta. It was called CJOC. And CJOC was a CBC affiliate. And so we got to see all the CBC programming. For example, on Saturday nights, we would have Hockey Night in Canada. And then right after Hockey Night in Canada, we would have the Don Messer Jubilee show with the, Don Messer dancers. And that's kind of what we would watch until 9 o'clock when we had to go to bed. Well, every day, that being Monday through Friday, we would have the 5 o'clock news. And the 5 o'clock news was basically half an hour. And that half an hour was 10 minutes of news, both local news and also international news. Then we'd have the sports for the day. And then Bill Matheson, who was the weatherman, would come up and give us 10 minutes of weather. And that was the extent of our news. Now, of course, we have social media, we have all the different platforms and internet and all of these different sources of news, and it can be literally overwhelming. And if you happen to be a subscriber to a particular platform, the algorithm there will always give you the news that you are scrolling. All of a sudden, if you are doing a particular subject or watching a particular two or three, all of a sudden you get this incredible amount of different news on that particular subject, and all of a sudden you can feel overwhelmed. And of course, just this last weekend, you had Iran being bombed by United States, and then Iran saying, "Okay, you can't do that." And so what happens is, of course, you get this saber rattling around. And depending on what side of the equation you find yourself, you either are for Iran or against Iran. You're either for America or against America. Or you can develop a kind of indifference and say, well, it's just these are two particular entities that are, fighting. Now, it's been interesting that only in the last, let's say, 5 years, we've been having more and more wars. Of course, we had the Ukraine and Russia war that started back in the early 2020s. And then the Israeli war, where basically they've been bombing the daylights out of Hamas and Gaza for since, of course, October in 2023. So it's been very interesting. And now, of course, you have almost nightly bombings between Iran and Israel. And then, of course, the president of the United States decided he was going to bomb the nuclear facilities of Iran, saying, we don't we gave you 60 days to negotiate. You didn't negotiate, so we're going to bomb the daylights out of you. And then he lifts up and says, to all the great service people of the United States, success, etc., etc. But then you get the United Nations saying, wait a minute, you can't go and bomb a sovereign nation. You never made a declaration of war. This is kind of like Pearl Harbor all over. You went through war because of Pearl Harbor. How do you think this is going to affect Iran? And so it's going back and forth and back and forth. And here we are. You say, okay, well, this doesn't really affect me. I live in, for example, I live in Canada, right? So we're not going to go to war with Iran because Mr. Trump says so. But it's interesting that whatever happens around the world does affect us, especially when United States gets involved, because the simple fact is that oil prices, for example, I mean, I heard yesterday that Iran says, okay, we're going to close off the port of or the Strait of Hormuz, and we're going to that means that 20% of all the world's oil is going to be stopped by Iran. Now, we know the United States is not about to let that happen. So there is a possibility of confrontation between the Iranian Navy and the American Navy. And we know who will win that particular situation. But what's going on is that immediately spooks the oil speculators. And what happens is our gas prices go up all of a sudden. And the gas companies, as you are well aware of, is the fact that in the summertime, they already shoot the price of gas up. We've seen that here in Alberta. We have actually the lowest gas prices in all of Canada. And yet now we have seen the gas prices shoot up 12 cents. Why? Per liter, which is about 50 cents a gallon. We've seen that go because of the saber rattling that goes on in, of course, the Middle East. And so here we have, our everyday life being affected by something that's happening 10,000 miles away, and because of a decision of an individual in another country. And so you say, well, how does that all relate to where we're going? Well, if you have been following me, then you also know that I believe in what we would call the soon coming of Jesus Christ and also end times. That means that you and I are getting closer and closer to the coming of Jesus Christ and also the end of this particular era. Now, you say, well, we've been here before. No, we haven't. The one thing I want to remind you about is the fact that, yes, Iran and Israel have been enemies for decades, okay? At one time, they were actually friends because the Shah of Iran was, of course, a friend of Israel. But when he was booted out in 1978, 1979, and the Islamic regime took over, well, then, of course, it became more hardline and more against Israel. And then for decades, of course, was funneling and also as well financing its proxies. And those were, of course, Hamas and Hezbollah. And today, the Houthis in Yemen, they are all basically financed by Iran. Now, of course, we have this, missiles and Israeli jets pounding the daylights out of each other for the last 10 or 12 days. So it's very interesting. We haven't had this particular level of animosity between, of course, um, Israel and Iran, and now the United States gets involved. So we're finding that we're coming closer to the edge. So what does that mean for you and I day by day? Well, I subscribe to the idea that each and every day is precious. Each and every day is an opportunity to not only watch the news, but make an impact in your life. Now, I don't want to be morbid, and I certainly don't want to be macabre when it comes to what's happening here. But the reality of the situation is that, according to, and this was interesting, I actually read this today, that the uh, statistical people that kind of watch the world population, they say we have about 8.2 billion people that live on this planet. Now they're saying that they're actually underestimating the size of the human population, because most of their statistics are based on larger communities, and they're discovering that the rural communities are actually, the rural population is actually larger. So they're actually upping the amount of people that live on this planet to about 8.3 to 8.4 billion people that live on this planet. I thought, now that is pretty, that's a lot of people. Now, every single day, according to the statisticians, they say that 1.3 people will pass into eternity. That means that somewhere between 184,000 and about 210,000 people are going to pass into eternity. Now, many, of course, know that they're going to have, because they're in what we would call palliative care. They know that their end of life is close at hand. But that is less than 10% of those who will pass into eternity. That simply means that there are about 160 to 280,000 people every day don't realize that they're going to pass into eternity. Now, I happen to ride a motorcycle, and it was interesting that on my latest motorcycle trip, I had one incident where I was getting ready to pass a particular big truck. And it was only as I looked into my rear view mirror that I was just getting ready to pull over, where this car comes zooming by really, really fast. And if I hadn't looked in my mirror, and if I hadn't shoulder checked, well, guess what? I could have been another statistic. I may not be sitting here today talking with you. Now, anytime that you get into an automobile, anytime that you go out, there's a possibility, and I'm not trying to be morbid, I'm not trying to be, there's a possibility that you and I could not come back. And that happens quite often. In fact, in a small town where I live right now, there was a young couple that was on their way to an actual performance in which my son was involved. And it was Joseph's Technicolor Dreamcoat is the name of the play. And the narrator was a young lady with her family that was traveling towards the community in which we live. And it was on a snowy afternoon, and someone blew the stop sign between the two main roads and T-boned their vehicle, and they lost a son, a daughter, I should say, a younger daughter. And the members of the family are still in recovery over that situation. Here they were on a rural road, in a small town, and this happened. And that was strictly a reminder to me about the fact that we live in the light of eternity. and some of the wildest ways that people pass into eternity. It just reminds me that we need to maximize every day, that we make an impact in people's lives every day. In fact, I read something today that was very, I thought was very informative. And in fact, I'll be putting it on, I recorded it and I put it on my YouTube shorts. And it's simply this, that look for somebody who's who knows that you are not perfect, but treats you as you were. And then my exhortation was, okay, when you meet someone, treat, even though you know that they're not perfect, treat them the way that you want to be treated. In fact, that is called the golden rule. And it's not, whoever has the gold rule. It talks about the fact that you are to do unto others as you'd have them do unto you, which means that no matter how you treat me, I'm not going to treat you the same way. I am going to treat you, and I'm going to, interact with you as the way that I want to be interacted. It doesn't matter how someone treats you. What's important is how you treat them, because it is a reflection of your character, not a reflection of theirs. So the simple fact is, every day we have an opportunity to make an impact. Remember, the bad days will, of course, give us experience. The hard days give us that reality that we can learn something very practical and powerful. And when we have good days, it brings happiness and it brings joy into our lives. And days can also be very fluid. That means that you can have good things that happen to you and bad things that happen to you. In the recent days, I think I've had more bad things happen to me than I've had good things. But it's okay, because the simple fact is that every day that I live and every day that you live, we have an opportunity to correct mistakes. We have an opportunity to change the direction of our lives by the choices that we make. It was John Maxwell who said that every day is a matter of small decisions and choices. And it's actually our small decisions and choices that give the direction for our lives. So remember, each and every day, look at us as an opportunity to definitely make an impact. We're told to love those that come into our world. Jesus said this: people will know that we are his disciples by the way that we love one another. So my exhortation for you today is show love. Love is patient and love is kind. You've often heard me say simply this, that if anything else, just be kind. There's a little phrase that goes like this: be kind, because you don't know what that person is going through or has gone through. So it's important that you are kind. It's important that you and I treat people the way that we want to be treated, because here's a real truth: what we sow is what we reap. So if you are going around and sowing discord and making negative comments, belittling people, that's what's going to happen to you. And what's going to happen is it's going to build a cycle of negativity in your life, and that's not something that you want. You want to live, as it says in one of the Monty Pythons, live on the sunny side of life. And that's what you want. So remember, today, throughout this day, remember, you and I can make such an important impact in someone's life. Remember, people may not always remember what you said or even what you did, but they will remember how you made them feel. Make them feel loved. Let them feel like someone cares. The smallest act of kindness could actually make someone's day. I love those social media experiences. One of them that I was watching just recently is these five guys surround a girl, and she's looking like she is, and they give her this kind of looking face, and then all of a sudden they give her a present or a flower. And I love the reaction of the lady. For one moment she's looking frightened, the next moment she's sitting there with the biggest smile on her face, and so are all the guys. And it's just a social experiment to show that people really do care. Another one that I was watching recently was a guy who walked up to someone. He says, "I've been having a bad day. Can I get a hug?" Now, some people will actually be repulsed by that particular experiment, but many others don't even think twice about it. They walk over and they give the individual a hug. And I think to myself, that is absolutely wonderful. Another social experiment that I was watching just yesterday, and I like these social experiments because what they do is they film the reaction of people, real people being, going out and being touched in a powerful way. This one fella, he walks up to people who are crying, and he'll give them a flower, and then he walks away. And what happens is, almost instantaneously, 9 times out of 10, that individual will call them back and they will have this wonderful conversation. It's just a reminder that the smallest act of kindness, and you don't have to do it. I mean, these particular situations are filmed and then put on the internet. But you don't have to film it. You don't have to go out there and, promote yourself. In fact, Jesus said that the Lord rewards those who do these acts of kindness in silence, without the fanfare. A perfect example of that was Jesus one day was watching in the temple in his day. There was what they call the poor box. It was a box that people would give money to help the poor in Jerusalem. And so Jesus was sitting there and he was watching all these rich people dropping money into the poor box. And all their friends were going, "Oh, that's you so generous." And then in the midst of all this fanfare, a little woman, a widow woman, comes in and drops down 2 copper coins. And Jesus said that woman actually gave more proportionally than all the rest, because these people gave out of their excess, she gave out of her poverty. And that is pretty impressive. And so when you do something for someone, do it in a manner that no one's going to get the applause. No one is going to get all the credit. Do it because it's in you to be kind and be loving and be generous. Be generous. It's so important to do those things without the fanfare. Don't have your friend go out there and, film you doing these different things. Now, I know that actually there are influencers who do this, and they do it so that they can get, likes, and also as well, more subscribers. And they do it to actually promote their business. And that's fine. If they want to do that, that's up to them. But they're not ever going to get any reward from heaven, that's for sure, because they've already received all the accolades. Warren Buffett is an extremely generous man. And a few years ago, back in about 10 years ago, he gave $34 billion to charity. And everyone was patting him on the back and saying, "Warren, you are a generous man." And he is a generous man. No doubt about it. But you see, if he's looking to get, reward from God, it's not going to happen because he's already had the accolades and applause of man. God is looking for us to do those acts of generosity, those acts of love and kindness without all the fanfare. And when we do that, when the time to settle everything up, he is going to reward us accordingly. So throughout this day, maximize every moment of this day. Use it well and use it for the benefit of others. Be a blessing today. Be an encourager today. Be an influencer today. And use every act of kindness as an opportunity to be an inspiration in someone's life. Your act of kindness could actually change someone's life. I'll close with this particular story. Back in the 1960s, there was some real gang violence happening in the city of New York City. There was a pastor in a small town in Pennsylvania that read about what was going on, and he decided he was going to do something about it. So he traveled 4 hours every single one Saturday every week, and he would travel there, and he began to interact with the gangs. And he stood on the corner and said, "Would anyone shake my hand?" And well, over a few weeks, he was able to interact with some of the gang members. And then he decided to hold a crusade. And as he went and held this crusade, some of these gang members came. One of those gang members was a guy named Nicky Cruz. Nicky Cruz, of course, wrote a book called, The Rebel. And so anyway, Nicky Cruz at the time was the most violent gang member and also the leader of the Mau Maus, which was, of course, the most dangerous gang in all of New York City. Now, what happened was David Wilkerson asked Nicky Cruz to take up the offering that was given every night to help defray the costs of the crusade. Now, what happened was Nicky took up the offering, and it was a very substantial offering because he would look at the guy and say, "That's not enough." And the guy would give whatever he had to. And then when Nicky was standing there, his friend says, "Okay, come on, let's go." He says, "No, the preacher trusted me, so I'm going to give him." So he brought the offering up to David Wilkerson. And that act of trust actually changed Nicky Cruz's life. And so what happened was when David Wilkerson gave the invitation, Nicky Cruz gave his life to Jesus Christ. And Nicky Cruz then became later on a world famous evangelist. David Wilkerson went on to have a book called The Cross and the Switchblade, which became a movie and also as well videos. And David Wilkerson then recognized that there was a major problem with drugs and alcohol in America. And he started an organization that is still working today among young men and young women with addictions. And they actually have an 85% recovery rate. And it all stemmed from, and this organization is called Teen Challenge. And in my province of Alberta, we have a Teen Challenge. And I've had many times interactions with the people of Teen Challenge. What it all started by a man who saw a newspaper ad, went to New York, and made a difference in the gangs of New York, and was then able to start a ministry that is still running today and is still, a part of the recovery of literally thousands of people. You can do something like that. You say, "Well, I'm not of that quality." Listen, David Wilkerson was a pastor in a rural community. He didn't know what God was going to do. He didn't know how far reaching the impact that he was going to have on a generation and on thousands, hundreds of thousands of people's lives. Just walk out in faith. And like I said, your small act of kindness could change someone's life. So that's my exhortation for you today. Thank you for spending time with me today. My name's Robert Dean Steele. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you today for this day. And thank you for those who are watching this video or will watch this video. I pray that they will be impactful. I pray that they'll be inspirational. I pray that they'll be encouraging. I pray that, Lord, they would walk with love today and also realize that when they do that, it's going to come back to them. And I thank you for this now. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, again, if you like what you've been hearing and seeing, please press the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, every day, check out my YouTube shorts, which are basically, somewhere between under 1 minute, and they are little snapshots and vignettes that encourage you and inspire you throughout your day. Thank you for spending time with me. My name is Robert Dean Steele. You have yourself a great and godly day.